Classic Business with Michael Avery, sponsored by Alex Forbes, for insight, advice, and impact.
Well, with billion-dollar investments, geopolitical rivalries, and quantum computing breakthroughs, the race for AI dominance is accelerating at a blistering pace. We recently saw US President Trump's $500 billion Stargate project to China's DeepSeek shaking up the game with its low-cost, high-performance models. I think the stakes really have never been higher. But what does all of this mean for the balance of power, for business, and for the way we live and work here in South Africa? Well, joining me today is Africa's foremost artificial intelligence thought leader, Johan Steyn, as always, to break it down without any of the jargon or the hype, just the real. Jay, all the best for 2025. Hope you're well.
Same to you, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's a great honor.
Well, we've started like a bullet train in tech. Let's start with the big money. Trump's $500 billion AI investment. It's just a staggering sum. And we've seen some critics like Elon Musk questioning whether it's truly available, the money, or whether it's even viable. In your view, how feasible is such a large-scale AI infrastructure project, and where might the hidden risks lie?
Yeah, Michael, just to quickly comment, I read for 2 hours every morning to keep up with AI advancements, and I'm not keeping up. This stuff is happening so quickly. It's staggering. And you're right, this $500 billion investment, and I think it's partners of OpenAI, SoftBank, Oracle, and others. And the money is not there yet. I think the initial investment is going to be probably about $100 billion. I wonder if it's not a bit of a knee-jerk reaction with the US slowly slipping away from the power game against China. Look, it's all about building infrastructure, huge computing facilities, especially in Texas. I don't know if they're going to get the money, and Elon Musk might be right on his criticism of it. It'll be interesting to see what will happen with this. My one worry is what we can call a digital oligarchy. Will this power be in the hands of a small few companies like it is at the moment, and will it increase the power of that small amount of people in this digital oligarchy? We will have to see. I already, from following the news, it seems that there's a lot of things that Trump and his people promised that's either not happening as soon or not going to happen at all. It will be interesting to keep an eye on this.
I guess one has to look at the incentives, because these companies that are backing Stargate, the SoftBank and the OpenAI and the Oracles that you mentioned, have different incentives here. Do you see potential conflicts between government-backed AI ambitions and private sector interests? I think we are already seeing it with the way Elon Musk has approached the situation.
Absolutely, and I think this is a big geopolitical play. It's also scarily a big play when we look at the militarization of this technology. And that brings us to the whole idea of regulating it, because I think nation-states are so desperate to stay on top of the heap, so to speak, that no matter how we deploy this technology and who it might hurt or not, as long as we remain the strongest military power, as long as we can exert our influence across the world by using this technology, I think the private sector, these big firms, will play a big role. Obviously, they want to make money, but they are also competitors, so it'll be interesting to see. It's like herding a bunch of cats and throwing them into a cage and to see who comes up. But it's definitely going to be interesting times. We might even have other entrants as well into this Stargate initiative. It will be interesting to see where it's going to go and if it's going to happen at all.
Well, and that's the other question around whether or not it is the right way to go, given what we've seen out of China just over the last few days and DeepSeek. And, it's incredible to think that here you have in China a very unknown certainly to Western followers of this and Western investors, unknown hedge fund, high-flying capital, and developing a model, apparently, if you believe the numbers, that they could train for, $6 million US, that performs very similarly to OpenAI's ChatGPT, and they've spent billions on training that model. Firstly, how believable is that?
Yeah, look, it's 5.5 million that was reported. They trained the most recent model, R1. It's a reasoning model. In other words, it thinks and it plans its response when you prompt it, where OpenAI and others, it's almost like they just suck whatever they can from the web and give you an answer that's often not relevant. But just put it into perspective, Microsoft said this year they will spend $80 billion on AI infrastructure. Meta, $65 billion. This is interesting. ChatGPT, their platform OpenAI costs them, also ChatGPT costs them $700,000 a day. Their losses will be about $5 billion this year. And here comes this blind-sighted, smallish Chinese company, and for less than $6 million trained this model. I think this is a massive wake-up call for Silicon Valley in particular. Will we see others following suit from across the world? Probably. I just wonder where these big firms, again, these oligarchs, will end up over the next year if they are upended by these smaller and especially Chinese model creators. It's a very interesting space to keep an eye on.
And why I think, one should always hesitate when you see government trying to back and pick winners. I'm very critical of the South African government's industrial policy because often it tries to back winners and the market. If anything, I think one of the big insights for me from DeepSeek is that when you try, and we had Biden's CHIPS Act and trying to prevent the Chinese from gaining access to the NVIDIA chips, when you try and influence the market, human innovation and ingenuity will find a way around that. And the question for me is this proof that China's kind of iterative approach is winning and that it's going to succeed regardless of the way the US approaches trying to stop it getting its hands on key infrastructure or hardware or silicon?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we saw this in human evolution when we started moving north from Africa and it's more hostile, cold kind of regions. We started innovating a lot more than those who stayed behind in Africa from an evolutionary point of view. So I think I understand why America is trying to block China. And again, it's a bit of a knee-jerk thing. But people with the intelligence like the Chinese and the money behind them, they will innovate. We will see this from other countries as well. And coming to South Africa, what always troubles me is the people I deal with and speak with are some of the smartest, most innovative people in this space that I've ever met. But it's almost impossible for them to get good government contracts and to scale the platforms that they're building. And I think that's why many of them are leaving our territory, basing themselves somewhere else. And that is a big problem. And it also is a problem about future employment. We are now really trying to teach robotics and coding in our schools. That's another conversation for another day. Coding might see the end of days as well, given where these platforms are going. But we essentially are training up youngsters to be sucked up by other countries. And where will that leave us in the next 10 or 20 years? Will we just be a population of manual workers doing work that is highly automatable in the future by this kind of technology?
I do worry. I worry for Africa. Yes, we've got this demographic dividend, and it really isn't of much value in a world where a lot of that is going to be automated. Already we see in the evolution of robotics that certain manual tasks, we always said, no, AI will be for knowledge workers and white collar, but it won't replace your plumbers and bricklayers. But already we're seeing some of those manual tasks being replaced by robotics, not so much at the economies of scale that make them cost competitive yet, but surely that future's coming. How should we be thinking about this here in South Africa to ensure that we try and catch up, because we are so far behind already?
Look, there's been a lot of talk about AI regulations, and as you know, I'm part of the group that's looking at recommending certain regulatory frameworks to our government. A lot of that will probably be based on elements of the EU's AI Act, but what we've already started seeing in the EU, for interest's sake, is that their kind of pace of innovation in the AI space is slowly declining because of the very hard regulations that they work under. And that's do you race this car faster without a seatbelt, or you can kill yourself, so you need the seatbelt? So that balancing act is very difficult. I think, Michael, it all starts with our education system across the world, but especially in our country. I mean, we've had some wonderful news about the matrics of last year. What they didn't say much about is the dropout rate. So we are bringing young adults through the system who are not work ready in this AI world that we live in. A lot more needs to be done on education from a secondary point of view, but especially tertiary, exec ed, and the like. We've got some wonderful innovation labs in our country, especially with some of our universities, but they all are telling me how corrupt it is to the process to secure the funds and how little funds are available. So I think we must work with government, but it starts there. Whether much will be done, I'm not sure, and I'm a bit pessimistic about that, sadly.
As am I. I mean, we kind of know what needs to be done, but at the political level, there's still so many foundational issues and squabbles over things like pit latrine toilets, and yet we need to be focusing on these issues. At a broader level, when you look at AI and national security and the regulation of AI, if we relax regulation, if we see it relaxed in the US in order for, as those in Silicon Valley like Peter Thiel would argue, in order for the US to compete with China, we need to relax regulation. We need to make sure that, people want to come and innovate in America. Doesn't that raise the chances of AI's misuse, especially in areas like cybersecurity and deepfakes and election interference? Because you look at companies like Anthropic, who are developing AI, and Claude, it's a very well-known model. They've been very vocal about the key need to regulate AI, but in a very safe and interpretable fashion. You have to have guardrails with this technology.
Yeah, it's interesting that those who are making billions and will be making billions from this technology are against regulation. We can understand why. When we look at the academic kind of fraternity and others in private business, they are all pro-regulation. I was on a panel the other day with Microsoft, their big event here in Sands, and we spoke about responsible AI. And I said, tongue-in-cheek, you never see an event on responsible Excel, because it's a great tool, but you can't really cause harm with it. Or responsible use of computer keyboards. Yes, you can slap somebody over the head in an office, but you can't cause harm. It's the causing of harm on so many different levels that we need to worry about. My big worry in Africa is the so-called colonization, digital colonization. We are already highly dependent on foreign powers when it comes to our digital infrastructure, especially from China. And I'm not saying anyone is good or bad in this kind of argument. I'm just worried that if that foreign power one day switches it off because of a trade dispute or a potential war, and all of our infrastructure is no longer working, we need solutions for Africa by Africans. Leverage the so-called global north platforms, but let's not over-rely on them. So the potential societal impact, we really can get, and I'm often the one on the panel that's more negative than others, we can get to a Mad Max kind of a world of total social unrest, given where this technology is going and in whose hands the power lie, because it doesn't lie in our hands.
I mean, it's just, that's being rational and real and pragmatic. I mean, if you have the power, if you win this AI arms race, it does give you an edge in diplomacy, in trade, in military strategy, all of these things. And why I think the US is taking this as seriously as it is. But again, why we need to be watching it so closely here in South Africa. I don't want to talk about quantum just yet, because I think we need to do a special episode just to understand and wrap our heads around quantum computing, because it is staggering. If you think AI is staggering, quantum is just years ahead. Let's talk about more recently what we saw from OpenAI, agentic AI. They released this. I haven't played around with it yet, but just the idea of a large language model being able to control my computer and do tasks, it's very unnerving. And we saw Microsoft, Satya Nadella, predicting that agents are going to replace software as a service applications. I mean, how realistic is this?
Yeah, if your listeners search for agentic AI, you will find thousands of articles. I mean, it's probably the biggest buzzword in AI at the moment. It basically means that I can use an AI platform like an OpenAI, although there are many working on this at the moment. And without needing a specialist vendor or a technology specialist, I can actually give it tasks. So when an email comes in from that domain, immediately schedule a meeting on Thursdays, or extract information from this document and automatically produce a purchase order, etc. Now, this technology has been around for a while, but we always had specialists doing it for us, especially in the robotic process automation world. Now we're looking at a real democratization of this technology. I, as a non-technical individual, by learning it a bit, firstly, can actually create tasks in my AI system. And we saw recently the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, spoke about this at length in a number of interviews, where he talked about the future of Microsoft, which is to some extent obviously a platform, a software as a service. But that idea will die over the next few years because of agents. And then the other big question of agents is that more so than ever, AI agents or agentic AI will take jobs away from people, especially lower level admin repetitive kind of jobs, but even others. And still at conferences and people I speak with, we are almost like a kind of an ostrich with our head in the sand, saying AI will create more jobs than we will lose. The question is, what kind of jobs and for who?
Yeah.
And this agentic AI is a big thing. I don't think it's just a word of the moment. It will revolutionize how we use software, develop software into the very near future, and it will have a massive impact on employment.
Yeah, and I tend to side with you. You know, you look at a lot of the mainstream views and economists, and they say, no, it's going to create more jobs than it displaces, but that transition isn't going to be smooth. It's not going to be linear. And I think we're looking at a period of huge economic and social upheaval, particularly in Africa, because I don't see Africa prepared for a market that is reshaping itself as quickly as AI is reshaping markets at the moment. Just lastly, Johan, when you look at all of this, what do we need to start doing in South Africa to agitate for more attention, more bandwidth, more spending on this particular issue? We could really take the lead on the African continent.
Absolutely, Michael. Again, back to education, back to the government. I mean, we saw with Elon Musk's Stargate, the controversy around that being deployed in South Africa, where initially the government wanted a certain amount of BEE investment, almost forcing them. And then he had the chat with our president, and then they kind of relaxed on that whole thing. The way we procure, the way we incentivize businesses, especially in this space, needs to change. It can't be so heavily regulated from a government point of view. Yes, let's protect our citizenry, but we must have the structures and the policies in place and the funding to really incentivize local and foreign businesses to do big things here. And then the same with Africa through the African Union, possibly. And again, back to education. Are we preparing a workforce that's ready? And can we rely less on countries like India and the Philippines, etc., from an outsource point of view? So I think, again, let's find those highly skilled, very ambitious, wonderfully smart youngsters that we have and give them a winning chance, because right now I don't think most of them have a winning chance.
Absolutely. Johan Steyn, I think the one thing that is certain is that the AI revolution isn't waiting for permission. It's happening whether or not we get our house in order or not. Thanks for joining us here on Classic Business.
Thank you.
Classic Business with Michael Avery, sponsored by Alex Forbes, for insight, advice, and impact.